Um, Everyone made it, even if they're still like drunk from yesterday evening. So, good morning. I'm going to have like a small follow-up of the talk that I did last year here at TYPO Labs. I did a kind of a font lab kind of thing. I promised something, but I didn't deliver. That happens. I learned something out of it, so it's already there now before the presentation. So, ooh. We're going to talk about the next RoboFont version. The next release, it will be the 14th release since 2011. That's kind of like a nice average. It's like 2 every year, which is kind of a good thing. Not counting all the betas which are being sent out to different kind of people and users. The new RoboFont has UFO 3 finally, Python 3 really finally. But at the end, not really that much has changed. Because the core ID is kind of really a very, very valid ID. It's the core ID of RoboFont is it's just like a UFO editor. It's being able to edit everything which is saved in a UFO file. So you have different kind of data that you can store in a UFO. RoboFont will be the application that is able to edit all this kind of data which is stored inside the UFO. RoboFont will also have no knowledge. This was kind of a very strong point of view of me and on how an application could work. I was very disappointed that this morning I saw in Adam's presentation that the build names was not green but black. I like the green kind of icon, like kryptonite kind of thing, but it's not, it's black now. So you have like, I don't know, different color, never mind. RoboFont is also still a platform. It's an environment for both designing and for scripting. And then these kind of things just combine into one single kind of thing. So you can explore different kind of things within your kind of own design world. So this is 2, but maybe, yeah, there's UFO 3, Python 3. So UFO RoboFont 2 was still a kind of a very beta version of it. So some people have it and they have to keep it because it will be a collector's item. So it will be RoboFont 3, yay. UFO 3. UFO 3, UFO is an open source font format, which is documented. It's the only still. You trust your data and someone is writing it and you don't understand how people are writing it. So be careful with this kind of thing. So UFO is an open source file format where you just write something down to your data back to your file. The difference between UFO 2 and UFO 3 is that it's weird to have nothing to point. Yeah, but if I point here. Yeah, but also never mind. A UFO 2 is actually like a folder with an extension. Next to it, then there are like a bunch of files in there, which is all XML, which is readable for both human as for a machine. You have another folder in there, a glyphs folder, and from that glyph folders you have different kind of glyph data, and this was your UFO 2. And UFO 3, it just expanded. More data is being added to the UFO file. So we have layers which are natively stored inside the UFO file. So that's been called, for example, glyph.background. And all the background layers are... I'm going to kill someone with this. Pew. Oh, not you, sorry. You have glyph.background, where you have the background layer with all the glyph files in there. You have support for images, data, if you have your own custom kind of data that you want to store somewhere. What else is stored in there? In the glyph XML, there's also a place for guides, guidelines, images. Kerning has been handled like a little bit differently than in UFO 2. Which is kind of for the better, but maybe it will also change, I don't know. But the previous version of RoboFont already had all these kind of features. It had support for layers, it had support for images and guides, all the things which are kind of new to UFO 3, but not were able to be stored in a UFO2. That's true, but RoboFont 1 has this kind of hacky kind of thing working around. So it stored all this new kind of data in libs, which is kind of an attribute of a glyph or a font. Someone is speaking. The lib, and you can store arbitrary data in the lib. So all the layers will be stored in the glyphs lib. The guidelines and the images are also stored in there, which is it's okay, but that's only an implementation that RoboFont can read. And now with UFO3, all other implementations can just read this kind of thing. The cool thing is that by having all these features already in the older versions, it's actually a good way that RoboFont was on the right track. So it didn't really change that much. The core idea still stands because also the idea of the file format is just changing in the same kind of way as what the application has changed, independently of each other. But that means that you have all your UFO2 data and that you have to upgrade your data because they are not compatible. They are almost two different things. It will break some stuff somewhere. There are tools that helping you. Inside RoboFont, there is UFO Lib. UFO Lib is a package which is reading and writing the UFO file. And from there, there's also a conversion happening. If you're reading a UFO2, it will convert to different kind of things like kerning into a UFO3 kind of world. RoboFont will also add another kind of conversion. It will convert your layers from your UFO2 files and guidelines and images to something that is readable in a UFO3 world, which is a good thing. So that's already one thing. Done. Another thing, Python 3. Python 2 will end in 2020, which is a good thing. It's already been deprecated almost for 10 years. Python 3 is already around for 10 years. It's a really grown-up, full-functioning programming language, and we have to change somehow, somewhere. That was the big change between the presentation I did here last year. It was the Python 3 just came along. Just and I have an application called Robot. Just and I, we converted Robot from Python 2 to 3 in a week and a half. So we learned a lot on how you can convert your existing code base to a new code base in Python 3 world. And it was really fast in adapting this the code base to a Python 3 world. So the idea was that maybe I have to also apply this on RoboFont, because then you have a change of UFO3 and Python 3. That's one change, so people have to change at one point their code and their UFO data, which is better to have one change than two changes in 1 year time, so, for example. So the change for the code base for RoboFont, it was one evening, because already I knew what to look for and what tricks there are to convert your code from Python 2 to 3. So a little bit of the changes. This is the simple example. The print is within brackets now. It's not a statement, it's a function now. So you just say print hello world with the brackets, and then it will just output the hello world string. Really cool thing is that all strings are Unicode, which is really, really useful. Python 2 has a small Python build. We have a big Python build, which stops at a certain level of Unicode support, which is a not nice way. So now in Python 3, you have either raw data, which is stored on your laptop, on your hard disk, or the data that you can read and you can work with. It's either bytes, the thing that you store, or strings, the thing that you can read and that you can work with and you can do something with. Another really cool thing is that divisions. Divisions now have all floating numbers. In Python 2, if you divide 10 by 3, you just get 3, which is you're missing a little bit. A whole, a third you're missing. So with Python 3, everything is now just dividing in nice decimal numbers, which is cool. Maybe the biggest change, if you're making bigger modules and packages or even applications, is the way that you have to import things from specific modules into other kind of modules. So the idea is that you have two ways of importing code from a different kind of point, where you have either it's installed in Python, then you just import the package from there, or you import it relatively, and that happens with the dot, and then you just do, for example, from dot import my module, and this is a file which is relative to the file which is executing this whole kind of thing. This means that you have to update your existing coding. All the extensions, all the scripts that you have written, either for RoboFont or externally, you have to upgrade your coding because Python 3 will happen. Everyone will be forced. Python 2 will be dying in 2020. That's only 2 years. So you have 2 years' time now to convert your existing coding if you're like a programmer. There are like a lot of tools that already can help you by upgrading your code, even to make your code compatible in two ways. It will work in Python 2 world and in Python 3 world. So for example, the future package is helping you like a lot in dealing with specific changes in both Python 3 and Python 2 and the Python 3 world. Font Tools has like a really nice collection of tools also to make your code compatible in the two kind of worlds. Vanilla is the package which is been used to build interfaces with, has some sort of support specifically for vanilla kind of views and objects. The same thing for RoboFont in the Mojo module. If you want to know what's in there, just type help, and then you just provide it a module or a function, and then it will print out the documentation related to that module or function, which is kind of cool thing. I know, this is really scary for both simple designers, for developers, starting developers, even for high-level developers. It's really scary because you have to change your precious data that you are working for like years on, but you also have to change the tools that you're working with. So it has to happen at some point because this will be the future. It's not that difficult. RoboFont is really helping you. The other tools are also helping you. There are also a little bit of API changes due to the change of, for example, this UFO2 tree change. So RoboFab, this was the package that we used to read and write UFO files in either FontLab, RoboFont, Glyphs, or in non-lab. That doesn't exist anymore. This is dead. It's discontinued. It's just there for reference, but it's gone. So now we're using FontPart. FontPart is kind of like the next level of RoboFab. We opted for a really clear break because it's different from RoboFab. It's implementation independent. So if I'm working for FontPart, I'm not the RoboFont guy, I'm the FontPart guy, and I'm thinking about how can we make it as easy as possible for people to write scripts that works either in RoboFont, Glyphs, or FontLab if the other two are supporting this. And how to provide tools for other developers and application and implementations to import and to embed font parts in their kind of workflow, which is kind of cool thing, because then you can use the same script in this kind of different kind of environment. And it's kind of, we have to, as type designers, we have to be glad that we have now 3 applications, 4, 5 maybe, that we can use simultaneously through each other. UFO is kind of a nice bridge between different kind of. Python is also a nice bridge, but everyone has to be kind of speaking out of the same language. And font parts is this kind of language that we can just speak with each other. It has changes with RoboFab, so your scripts will not completely work. Most of the thing that are changes is that non-lab also doesn't exist, because non-lab has like a reference to FontLab, and we don't want to have any kind of reference to any kind of implementation. RoboFab started as an extension or an adaptation of the FontLab application, and we want to really split out all the implementation-related stuff, so it's kind of a very independent kind of thing. So from FontPart parts of font shell, import RFont, and there you have your whole world of font parts. And then you can just you can read a file, you can print out, for example, here in this case, all the glyphs in the font. If you want to go to a specific kind of layer, this is very similar how RoboFont already did it before in the RoboFab world. So we have a get layer, which is extracting a layer. A layer acts as a font, because a font exists out of different kind of layers, and a layer or a font has glyphs. But things will also not work because of the legacy that we have to really carry, and we don't want to, at some point, we really want to cut a lot of this kind of legacy kind of things. For example, move. Moving an attribute, a method of a glyph, it's just like moving the glyph, in this case 100 and 100. The problem with move is that you have also components, and a component has a position, and never mind. So it changed back to move by, which is kind of a more clear defined method for moving kind of things. Font parts has this whole module that has deprecated functionality, so you get a warning. The functionality, it will just work as it was, but you get a warning. Yeah, I think it's better that you just use move by instead of move. So I think people have to change their code if they want to evolve, because the deprecated warnings will disappear at some point. I think we didn't really agree on what time schedule, but maybe like 2020 is kind of a nice thing to break everything and then just move to Python 3 and remove a lot of the deprecated stuff inside font parts. Some stuff, really old craft, will not work anymore. For example, font.info.designer. It's not stored in the font.info designer. UFO2 has this kind of detour that it was redirecting the designer kind of thing silently to the right position, which is kind of not a good thing. All this kind of new kind of attributes for the font info is documented on the specification of the unifiedfontobject.org, where the changes which happened between UFO1, because the font info.designer is a UFO1 attribute. This has been changed to OpenType name designer, which is kind of the better place, because that's also where these kind of things are stored. Another cool thing about RoboFab is that it had like a lot of pens, really cool stuff, little things that you can play with, things that you can use on a very simple kind of thing. They are now spread out. The funky, rather kind of really cool pens, they went to font pens. The really useful pens, they went to font tools and UFO Lib. So they have different kind of places where these kind of pens are ending up. This is documented on the website of RoboFont and on other places. But yeah, this is really scary. You have to find out, you have to... I made an extension that helps you to convert. It's a 123 .robofont extension, which is kind of faking RoboFab. It's faking all the pens. It's giving you like nice warnings and deprecated warnings. If you're importing or using something which is kind of an old RoboFab kind of thing, so it just gives you a warning when you use this kind of thing. So RoboFont 3, little bits of things. It's really faster. It's opening UFOs really fast, no matter how many glyphs you have in that UFO. It's really fast in the Space Center, which wasn't the case in RoboFont 1. It does like a lot of validation on incoming data. One of the big changes internally in UFO Lib is that your data is validated. So if you're putting an integer, a number in a specific field, then it should be a number, an integer, or a floating number, and it should not be a string. If it was a string, it will complain and I will tell you, hey, I need a number and not a string, for example, or different kind of data, which I think is a good thing. It didn't happen in UFO2, so you can have like wrong data on wrong places, and then other kind of things just broke down because of wrong data was on the wrong place, which is kind of a good thing that everything is now kind of validated, even the incoming UFO2 and existing data in the UFO3 world. It has independent layers, which was also different than in the old application. Small examples, independent layers. You can export, generate from different kind of layers natively. Little handy kind of things. You can set all shortcuts inside RoboFont with from the preference. You can just type in your own kind of shortcut. So if you want to have the command Q for quit, that it's a command T, whatever, you can just change that. The whole preference is also kind of editable, both in a UI kind of version or in a JSON kind of way, which is kind of a nice thing, because then you just can, you can generate this file, for example, or you just can copy paste, and then you have all the JSON or the data which is related to your preferences in there. Another kind of cool thing is moving. Auto closing inside the scripting windows with auto closing the brackets, because now you will write a lot more brackets because of print brackets hello world, for example. It auto close this whole kind of thing. It's not a free update. All the updates before, they were free since 2011. And this one was kind of like a lot of work, and I think it's kind of a valid time frame break, a clean break with the past, and it's kind of a good thing to have a kind of an update price. The pricing is the same. It's free if you bought it like not longer than a year ago. I'm not going to talk too much about this one. But another big change that happened is documentation. And the whole documentation, which already was kind of 6-year-old, is completely been rewritten. Gustavo Ferreira is taking on that as a kind of a real project. It's good that someone else is writing this documentation except of me, because 4 eyes are better than 2 eyes. And Gustavo is really doing a really good job. Just going to run through the whole kind of documentation. Next to documentation, I designed like a new font for the website. This is finished by my intern, Bernardo, a former student from St. Lucas in Ghent, which is kind of a weird thing, because what kind of typeface do you use for your font editor if you want to sell it on a website? Should it be like a very boring sans kind of thing? Yeah. Or should it be something else? I don't know. There are like a lot of how-tos, step-by-step guides, how you have to do specific kind of small task. This is written by different kind of authors, and it will be expanding and growing as a collection of little kind of articles. Gustavo is monitoring this kind of thing, which is kind of a good thing. Also that it's collaboration with other different kind of people. A complete new section about extensions on how you can start with writing extension. The talk of Nina at Roboton was kind of, she has like a really nice graph where the graph just started with a little bump and then you grow. But as a novice, as a type designer, you have to start with programming. And the start of programming, you have to get over this little bump, and then you just can grow and expand your knowledge on how you can write scripts and program and do kind of stuff that really is helpful inside your design world. There are a lot of handy kind of articles about how to build tools, complete new section for education. So if you're teaching, RoboFont is as free as possible for any kind of students in any kind of the world, which I think is a good thing, because tools have to be available for students. There's a license service for schools, and it's very cheap. Students' license are, at least for 1 year, they are free. They can be extended with the student license service. There is a new forum, which is kind of really cool one. The old one was kind of a WordPress kind of thing I don't dislike, so I was able to export all the old data and get into the new forum. It's already kind of a very active place of people asking questions, so now it looks like this. But maybe the biggest change or addition is the extension store. The problem with people writing extensions and putting it up on Mechanic, for example, or making it open source and available for everyone, is that it's free and everyone is using them. And it's kind of cool that a lot of people already did like a lot of extensions on Mechanic and different kind of like more than 100 are on Mechanic. There are more out there kind of without being on Mechanic as distributor kind of thing. But it's kind of a way that there is a gap between people writing really cool small extensions and what foundries or type designers are really needing as an extension. So I'm writing a lot of custom extensions. Other people are also writing custom extensions, and there is kind of a gap. And it's kind of annoying that a custom extension is only for one person or one foundry, and sometimes like the same kind of functionality is also being applied for different kind of people for the world. So maybe it's kind of nice to have kind of a platform where people can share their code, but also kind of earn like a little bit of money from it. So this is kind of the graph where you have GitHub and Mechanic is kind of the free kind of thing. It's public, it's all good, but you don't get paid as a developer, which is kind of not a nice thing because people are using this kind of tool in every day and they also want to pay, but it's kind of there is no way to really get the money back to developers, which is kind of the thing where the extension store step in. Lucas Schneider did the logo, which is kind of really cool. So if you can get the t-shirt if you are a certified developer. You have to write code and be in the extension store. Then you get like a nice sticker and a nice t-shirt. The extensions which are already now in the extension store one is the find and replace. It's one that I did, which is kind of a thing where you have a selection, you can search through all the fonts, all the open fonts, and then you can just replace it by something else or just then highlight the thing that you want to search for. Because you want to search on a very visual way, that you have a selection, a kind of a serif or like an arc, and you want to find all the different kind of arcs in your whole font. It has kind of nifty kind of tools because, for example, you have an arrow kind of slider which is pointing you that it also can expand. So if you made a mistake of 1 unit off, it can find still kind of the same kind of and even fix this kind of little mistakes, which is kind of useful kind of thing. But maybe the two biggest extensions which are already now in there are the ones from TAL, MetricsMachine and Prepolator. So MetricsMachine, TAL wrote a very long blog post on writing code and have about splitting his time on working with working on code and designing and where to find a kind of little bit of happiness in between, which is kind of in the cases sometimes. So I stepped in, I'm helping TAL in writing MetricsMachine. It became an extension because it's easier to write extensions inside RoboFont than writing a standalone application. You have to maintain more this kind of data, and maintain an application is more difficult than writing an extension or maintaining an extension. So MetricsMachine is kind of ported as it was to UFO3 and to Python 3, which was kind of a big thing. And now it works as it was as an extension inside RoboFont. But the really cool thing is that you just can now have MetricsMachine open inside RoboFont, edit your glyphs, see the changes directly in MetricsMachine, and just start kerning from there, which is kind of a nice kind of thing. The same thing with Prepolator. It's also ported as it was. We have, both Tal and I, we have new ideas on how we can work with Prepolator, MetricsMachine, but the first step was to get this thing working in the UFO3, Python 3 world, because it's really important that people, if they are changing their UFO data to UFO3, that they also just are able to kern and do prepolations and use Prepolator with that kind of data. Superpolator is already supporting UFO3, which is kind of a cool thing. So you just can work with this kind of data already in a Superpolator world. The extension store comes with an extension store extension. So it's kind of a very meta kind of thing, where you just can buy directly from this extension store, or find out the extension that you already bought or didn't bought. All right, that's it.